Alright, in my last video I talked about the different classes in Outriders, primarily focusing on the trickster and the devastator because I think those classes are better for the casual gamer, the person who doesn't have a lot of time, the person who generally tends to leave a game before they really even get very far into it. I suggested this because if they're having fun, then they're more likely to stick with the game, and the trickster and the devastator definitely seem to offer that fun early on because they're rather simple in basically just their playstyle. Obviously close range, everything benefits from being close range. However, the Technomancer and the Pyromancer definitely feel like they evolve as you play through the game. They're not quite there yet in the beginning. They require a little bit more time, a little bit more effort into your actual build. They require a little bit more synergy with their skills, and it kind of makes it a little bit more difficult. And so if a class is generally causing you to die more often, like was the case with me, then a person who generally doesn't stick with a game will be more likely to leave or abandon the game because they're just not having fun dying that much. Now, because of my experience with the amount of deaths that I had related to the different classes, I really did want to stick with the Pyromancer and the Technomancer just because I couldn't believe that they stayed this weak throughout the entire game. And to be honest, I'm completely glad I did. But this power creep doesn't really happen until you start to get out of the beginning blocks of the game. So once you get past the first two areas, then you might start to see a huge difference in your actual power level. This is because generally your skills are not cohesive. For the Technomancer specifically, you've got the short to medium range cryo turret, you've got the very short range mine, and then eventually you get the short to medium range pain launcher, which generally in my experience feels kind of awkward, especially early on. Now, given that the Technomancer is labeled as a long-range class, yet their skills early on are pretty much all short range, does not really go very well for many players, because obviously if you're trying to play a sniper and none of your skills are hitting enemies at a distance, well, of course that kind of seems a little bit boring, which causes you to rush up just to use your skills, and then of course because your skills are generally just more designed to be defensive to protect you while you're hiding in the back, this is kind of where we see problems. You rush up with these skills and then you die. And this was kind of the same case with the Pyromancer. Now obviously there's nothing wrong with the Pyromancer's abilities. The Flame Wave is handy in certain situations when you're being rushed by a huge mob. But again, that's short range. And of course Feed the Flames is actually a pretty good skill. I mean, just being able to suck the life out of enemies from a distance. But that is probably the most effective skill early on. The Bomb skill can be very nice in certain situations. However, it can be extremely awkward when you're trying to fight a group. You end up hitting the wrong enemy with the bomb, and maybe they're in the back and you can't kill them in time, and then the ability just wears off. So when you combine these different skills that are mostly reliant on being short range, and then you go into the class being a long or medium range, you're going to have issues, especially since those abilities are not designed to be overly tanky. Your class is not designed to be surviving up close battles. So because of this, because of the lack of cohesion with the builds early on, they definitely become more difficult to play for newer players. Now with the Technomancer, once you progress a certain amount in the game and unlock the Blighted Rounds or the Tools of Destruction, you are able to reach out and hit enemies at a further distance effectively. Now obviously the Blighted Rounds inflicts Toxic, which gives you status effect damage on any enemy that you shoot. So this just increases the basic synergy that you're going to have between your basic weapons and your anomaly powers. And of course, Tools of Destruction is a great skill for either, long, short, or medium range. Obviously, the rocket launcher can deal with groups of enemies, and it can be fairly accurate from a long distance. So if snipers are an issue for you, you can end up lobbing a few rockets towards them and take care of them really quickly. And of course, if melee characters are kind of your problem, you can always just switch to the chain gun mode, which will basically just wipe out whole waves of enemies rather quickly, rather effectively, and it's even good for the heavier, more durable enemies. And this is a very similar pattern that we see with the Pyromancer. Obviously, volcanic rounds can come in extremely handy. You can use it to shoot over the tops of cover and then basically just draw out snipers. Or just if the snipers just refuse to come out, you can keep basically applying burn to them and eventually kill them. But it also combines a huge amount of synergy when you combine it with Overheat and Feed the Flames. Obviously, Feed the Flames will keep you alive. Overheat will allow you to inflict a good amount of damage to anyone that you hit with the volcanic rounds. And of course, volcanic rounds just increases the distance that you can reach out and touch someone. Now, when will these classes become effective for you? Well, that really depends on your RNG. A lot of these abilities really don't hit their stride until you get the correct gear for them. So RNG can be hell if you don't get the right rolls, if you don't get the right talents or attributes on your actual gear. For me, I found that any gear that had one of these bullet talents in slot was going to be something that I just equipped on my character right away, because they increase the efficiency of my build dramatically. The other thing that I tried to find when I could be picky was the cooldown reduction and the status effect attributes. Now, obviously, you can't really say what you're going to get and when you're going to get it. But as you start to build up, as you get the ability to actually modify your gear, this can come in extremely handy, saving up these pieces, because you can just level them up. And then if you have cooldown and status effect on, some old pieces, leveling them up to your current character's level can result in dramatic improvement. So if you combine the right talents, the right attributes, you can have a class that is exceptionally well developed against a multitude of different enemy types. I mean, bladed rounds and the volcanic rounds, they are exceptional at dealing with clusters of enemies. They are great for dealing with widespread enemies, whereas most of the single-use skills are obviously only good if you have a bunch of enemies clustered together. Obviously, if you have enemies that are spread out, you can deal with each enemy individually, or you can just kind of spray and pray, trying to apply as many status effects as possible as fast as you can. This also allows you to deal with enemies that are in close groups or enemies that are rushing you. So you can apply these status effects to enemies anywhere. It's not limited to a specific cone or a specific area. It's up to you where you want to apply the skill. Now, for me, I might have gotten a little lucky. I did get a lot of this stuff that I was looking for relatively early. But on average, I think between the levels of 11 and 13 is when you're really going to start to notice this huge increase in power. So if you guys can hold on that long, which might take about 10 hours for a normal player. I mean, it really just depends on how you play and what you're kind of doing. And of course, how much the deaths of these classes actually hinders you. But if you can hold on, it gets a lot better, it gets a lot smoother, it feels fantastic, and these two classes definitely make run and gun rather exciting in this game. But either way, guys, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.